You are listening to EcoTopia on KZFR. With us on the phone now is Marc Schlossberg, Professor of City and Regional Planning and Co-Director of the Sustainable Cities Initiative at the University of Oregon. Marc's teaching, research, and community engagement focus on sustainable transportation, livable community design, and the processes that can accelerate implementation of more sustainable policy and practice. Among other courses, he leads a study abroad class to Denmark and Netherlands to focus on designing cities for people on bicycles. Marc will be presenting with Jessica Barlow from San Diego State on Friday, March 24th at Calusa Hall, room 100, 2 o'clock. Their talk is entitled An Epic Approach to Sustainability. Welcome, Marc Schlossberg.
Thank you very much. University of Oregon evening. It was great to hear Mary on the radio just a moment ago.
Very good. Your keynote address is going to talk about asserts that the barrier toward more sustainable practices tends not to be lack of knowledge on what we do, but lack of ability to put knowledge into practice. We could spend the whole evening talking about that, but how do you account for the gap between knowledge and practice?
It's a good question. There's a lot of different reasons I would probably say. I mean, anyone who does any work in sustainability is probably perpetually frustrated at the slowness by which we come on already and get stuff implemented and get stuff going, things that we know, things that we've known for 40 years how to do it. And I guess there's a few different things. I mean, on the science side or sort of on the academic side, it's generally a really slow process from knowledge creation to boring academic journals to finally in the hands and in a method that anyone can use. But besides that, I'd say sort of on the community side, and I think the biggest difficulty is just the inertia of the status quo and the inability for a lot of us to imagine something different than the status quo. And I think a good example of that would be around transportation. I tend to think about transportation all the time. But if you wanted to increase the number of people riding a bike in Chico, which I'm sure there's plenty of people who would like to see that happen, all good. But as soon as anyone suggests removing on-street parking and repurposing that space for a nice protected bikeway, well, then it's all kinds of chaos and difficulty. And part of that is inertia. It's not the way we've been doing it for 70 years. Fear of change. And that fear of change can be either community-wide or it can be actually built into the professional expertise of city staff. They weren't trained to build bicycle infrastructure. They were trained to do something else. There's a big risk aversion, both from the public but also in city staff, I would say, because city staff are generally really dedicated, smart people, and they're tired of getting beat up all the time when they try to put any new idea out in the public domain. So you would naturally get a little risk averse over time. And oftentimes there's a sort of lack of time to get up to speed and really do the work that's necessary. I'm talking here at a kind of a city staff perspective. So I would say those are all kind of contribute to what takes so long to get what we know needs to get done and put it into practice.
So you are working with a program, and I'm not sure, did you invent this? You're working with EPIC. You can answer that question. It's the Educational Partnership for Innovation in Communities, and what you're doing through EPIC is to try to bridge the gap between knowledge and practice. So tell us about EPIC. Where did it come from, and what does it intend to do?
Sure. So I'm a professor, and at the end of every academic term, students turn in papers, final projects, whatnot, and I look at them, I read them, I grade them, and I'm always amazed at how much brilliance gets put into this work, the heart and soul and innovation and ideas and excitement that students put into their work. And yet no one ever gets to see them other than me. And in fact, students don't even usually want my feedback. They just turn it in and then sort of move on. And so a few colleagues and I at the University of Oregon, we were having a session one day of just sort of sitting around and talking and kind of complaining about this fact. And we just kind of came to the conclusion that it's kind of immoral to society to have that much talent wasted. And so we wanted to come up with a way that better connected the brilliance of students, their ability to look at things in fresh new ways, and connect those to real projects that a city, a community is trying to advance as part of their work plan or whatnot. And so we came up with this model that in 2009, 2010, that's now called the EPIC model. And the basic idea, it's really absurdly simple, which is kind of fun, is it started with a question. What if we could take a whole bunch of classes on a university campus with their existing instructors teaching their classes in their existing ways and just match the projects in that class to a city over a fixed amount of time, but at a scale that makes a difference. And this is what's come about. So in an EPIC model, or sort of this university community partnership, we're typically working with one city over a year and matching maybe or pointing maybe 25 to 30 different courses across 10 or 12 different academic majors. So there's like 500 students giving 60,000 hours of their brilliance, insight, fresh thinking, energy to real issues that a city is trying to move forward. And what's really nice about this, for the previous question, is that students are not risk averse. You cannot hold them back, right? And so they have time, they have access to the latest knowledge around the world, and hopefully they're learning something in their classes, and they are not afraid to put new ideas in the public domain to try to move things forward. And so that partnership is the basis of the model.
And in fact, students want an education that's practical, that's applicable, that goes somewhere. They don't want their teacher to be the only one who looks at what they're doing. And so it just seems like a great opportunity for them to harness that energy. So you have students and faculty involved. How do the cities or communities that you use get selected? How do you find them?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways. So here in Oregon, the way we do it now, this isn't how we started, but the way we do it now is we actually have a request for proposals that cities now apply to the university to be our partner for a following year. And we do that because we only want to work with cities that are serious about implementing new things. We're not interested in doing philanthropy for a city or the city is saying like, oh, okay, I'll give back to the students and give them some, kind of hypothetical minor projects to work on. And so we vet cities based on buy-in from city council and mayor and staff, that they have projects that have a sustainability focus and that they are open and wanting to engage students in the fresh ideas that are happening. So that's how we solicit our main partner. But then within that, the cities, when they're coming up with projects, first the projects are part of their work plans, and hopefully the city has gone through their due diligence in community outreach and community engagement to develop what it is that are the priorities. But then as we're developing specific projects, then we're reaching out to a whole bunch of other stakeholders in the community. So I can give an example from a class that I teach. It's easy to give that kind of example. So as you mentioned, one of the classes I teach is on bicycle transportation. So I have the study abroad version, but I also teach one here in Oregon. And when I am developing the scope for the class, I'm reaching out to the city and asking them, who are the right people on city staff that I ought to be talking to? Who are the advocates or community organizations in town that I ought to be talking to? Even if you, city, don't have a good relationship with them, tell me, because my students will find out, and better you tell me now. Are there neighborhood association leaders? Are there local chamber of commerce? Who are the right community groups, formal or informal, that will want to be engaged in something like this? Tell me up front so that I can invite them in to engage with students. When we do site visits to the city, they can engage with us, et cetera. So we really try to build that kind of broad political stakeholder capacity along the way, so that when the students are presenting their final ideas in the community, that there's that much more likelihood that the ideas are relevant and appropriate to the needs expressed from a broad swath of the community.
So how big are these cities, and how many do you take on at one time?
Yeah, so we work with one city per year, and we work with a different city in Oregon each year. The furthest away that we have worked has been a 2.5-hour trip away from our university on the other side of the Cascades. So it also kind of disrupts the model that a university really only has to work with the community that it's in. And there's lots of communities around our states that need just as much help and ideas and as a city where our university is based. And the cities range in size. So in Oregon, we don't have a lot of big cities. So our smallest one was about 25,000 people, and the largest one we've worked with is 150,000 people.
Wow.
But there's other universities around the country that are now implementing the model, and some of them are working with like chunks of Minneapolis, which is, I don't know how big Minneapolis is, but that's a major city.
It's huge.
So it can really be applied to communities of a variety of sizes.
I'm really curious about this process. When the city, when they apply to you and you vet them as being serious and having people on board who are really going to carry this forward, do they present you with specific projects they want to have accomplished, or do they present you with problems? And then I'm curious about the balance of, I guess, power and expertise. Is it a cooperative project development, or do the students do it on their own? And how much? I'm asking you like about 20 questions all at once.
Yes, no, these are all the right, perfect questions. So projects are co-developed. So generally, the way it works for us is when the city is expressing interest in partnering with us, they present us with a long list of really brief projects spanning things from transportation, urban redevelopment, engaging marginalized communities in more public decision-making, cost-benefit and fiscal analysis type stuff, business development, a whole wide range of things. So they give us kind of a laundry list. And we've been working with them, maybe over a year or 2 years or 3 years to help them develop that. So it's, we're working cooperatively that way. So they give us a list of projects, and then we kind of shop it around our university. And then we do this iterative matchmaking process so that only projects go forward when there is a professor teaching a class and the type of work that the students can produce actually meets the needs and the interests of the city. So things only go forward when they're cooperative in a cooperative kind of nature. It has to meet everyone's needs, or else it's a waste of people's time.
Right,
so
right.
That's how we approach it.
Could you give us examples, please, of projects that have been implemented either in Oregon or your overseas summer program?
Yeah, I mean it's really amazing and humbling and incredible just how much students, and I'm talking undergraduate and graduate students, can produce, in our case, in a 10-week academic term, the things that they could produce that actually lead to change in policy and practice in the city. So just the raw capacity of students while they're learning, right? They're not experts yet, but even just while they're learning to produce work that can be implemented is incredible. And so some of the things that have been implemented are on a long time horizon. So when you're changing like a transportation system plan, you're not necessarily seeing things implemented right away. So that's a little bit more on the boring side. But for an example, in the last time I taught my bicycle class, there ended up being 17 primary recommendations that came out of the class and from students. And within a couple months, 15 of those 17 had been adopted into local planning documents.
Wow.
So, and then they worked through. Our biggest and most kind of amazing, sexy type of success was actually a business school course that was an industrial ecology class that looked at waste outputs of one industry that could be inputs to other industry to close the loop. And I won't go into a lot of the details, but they did a whole business case analysis around a biodigester and waste disposal and all this type of thing. And they recommended to the city of Salem, Oregon, that if they kind of implement their business model approach of their analysis, that the city would save and generate value equal to $800,000 a year in year one, and would do that every year from here on out. And this was one thing that the city looked at and kind of checked, did their due diligence to make sure the students were, doing a good job. And they looked at it and thought, yeah, we could do this. And sure enough, a year later, they had realized exactly what the students predicted.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, and now, actually, interestingly enough, the city of Salem went from having a biodigester that they thought was kind of like an excess infrastructure piece they didn't know what to do with, to now they actually use it as part of their economic development strategy when they're recruiting businesses to locate in Salem. Come to Salem, we have this excess capacity in our biodigester, and we can take care of your waste.
Wow.
So, from a sustainability perspective, it's fantastic.
I was interested to read on your website. You said we will likely have little direction on climate change issues from the national government. And you also talked about local projects on a scale that makes a difference. I wonder if you could talk a little bit, please, about the whole notion of scale that makes a difference when our government, in theory, could institute major projects on a scale that could make more of a difference than individual communities are capable of. At the same time, your case is clear that cities have to step in and do the work.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's probably a perpetual area of debate for lots of us doing environmental work.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my perspective, not surprising since I'm a professor of city planning, is that cities are really where it's at with addressing sustainability. I mean, if we're talking about transportation and power use and CO2 emissions, a good chunk of that is happening in cities, how we do our land use, how we do our transportation, how we do our power use and generation. And in fact, a lot of the innovation around sustainability is actually happening at the city level, whether it's bioswales to capture rainwater and green roofs and solar and retrofitting our transportation system so that we're not dependent on single occupancy trips for everything that we do. So a lot of the innovation's happening at the cities. Clearly, if we had a federal regime or an international regime that was supportive
cared
of sustainability, of serious about reducing our CO2, of not just in policy and carrots and sticks, but in funding to do the things that we need to do at a city level, it would help. It would help a lot, obviously. But I guess the way I look at it is I see cities innovating all over the place, and they're innovating for, in a lot of ways, self-serving reasons. They want to attract businesses and workforce and young people and retirees and keep the people that are living in their cities in places that are livable and sustainable and have a nice quality of life. And increasingly, sustainability is just part of what makes an attractive place to live. So it's a little bit of a rambling answer, but I guess at the moment,
There's a rambling question.
I've never been more focused on cities getting it right, because I don't foresee the federal government being interested, and most states not so interested. Thankful to you, to California, to be a leader in this space. Oregon and Washington, our West Coast, we're doing pretty good.
Yeah. We should become a country. We are very excited to have you coming to Chico. Our guest has been Marc Schlossberg. He is a professor of city and regional planning and co-director of the Sustainable Cities Initiative at the University of Oregon.